Hunting has been my passion for as long as I can remember. It's one of those timeless hobbies that never really fades away. Even after I got married, I couldn't completely give it up. Sure, I didn't go as often as I used to, but the idea of quitting entirely? That was never an option. My wife didn't mind too much, as long as I didn't overdo it. For the most part, things were good between us. I wasn't one of those guys who just lounge on the couch all day, ignoring my responsibilities. I pitched in around the house, did my fair share of chores, and even cooked dinner more often than not. We spent our weekends together, and overall, our relationship felt pretty solid. That said, we had a healthy balance of time apart. I'd head out for drinks with friends or go on hunting trips for a couple of days. Meanwhile, she'd hang out with her friends or have her own adventures. Still, despite all this balance, it was clear that something was missing. The day I went hunting felt like any other. Everything seemed normal, nothing unusual at all. My wife even helped me pack. We joked around a bit before I left. "I'll be waiting for you with the loot. Bring me something nice, will you?" she said with a smile. "You know I never come back empty-handed. Worst case, we'll hit a restaurant when I'm back," I replied with a grin. This time, I was heading out with two buddies, Jacob and Matteo. Jacob brought along his friend Dylan, who I didn't know very well, but I was cool with him joining us. The crew was solid, and the weather was perfect. Honestly, what more could you ask for? We planned to spend 2 or 3 days in the woods. It was familiar territory for us. We knew the area well and had our favorite spots for camping. As always, we brought our tents and supplies. Everything felt like one of our usual trips. After we settled in, we had dinner and gathered around the campfire. We cracked open a few drinks, and the evening was shaping up to be as relaxing as ever. But then, out of nowhere, Dylan decided to share something personal. For some reason, he chose me as his confidant. Why me? I have no idea. What he told me wasn't exactly new or surprising, just something I'd heard 1,000 times before. Apparently, things between him and his wife had grown cold. Dylan told me his marriage had become nothing more than a roommate situation. They barely connected as a couple anymore. To fill the void, he'd taken up with a mistress, a co-worker from his previous department. He explained how they'd kept it secret while working together, but could now be more open since his transfer. You wouldn't believe how hot she is. And the best part, she doesn't expect anything from me. She's married too. So it works out perfectly, he said, looking far too proud of himself. Honestly, I was growing bored with his tales of being a self-proclaimed ladies' man. It felt juvenile and obnoxious, but my upbringing stopped me from cutting him off mid-story. Dylan, oblivious to my waning interest, launched into an elaborate description of his mistress. My face must have shown my skepticism, because he suddenly stopped and asked, "Don't believe me?" He seemed almost offended, as if I'd challenged his credibility. My lack of enthusiasm only spurred him on. Dylan started fumbling with his phone, determined to prove his claims. "I'll show you her pictures. You'll see just how stunning she is," he said confidently. He scrolled through his phone for a moment before handing it to me. I wasn't particularly eager to see, but I took the phone out of courtesy. The moment I glanced at the screen, my entire world shifted. Every emotion hit me at once. Anger, shock, confusion, and a bitter, gut-wrenching sense of betrayal. There, staring back at me from his screen, were semi-nude photos of Olivia, my wife. I froze, the phone clutched tightly in my hand, as my mind struggled to process what I was seeing. I couldn't hear whatever nonsense Dylan was rambling about anymore. The world seemed to blur around me, consumed by the burning rage rising in my chest. Before I even realized what I was doing, I hurled the phone into the fire. It landed with a sharp crackle, flames licking at the device as Dylan's voice turned to frantic shouting. "What the hell are you doing?" he screamed, lunging toward me in a rage. But in his clumsy fury, he stumbled and crashed into one of the tents. I stood still, trembling with fury but unwilling to escalate the situation further. Dylan scrambled to his feet, his face contorted in anger. But before he could get closer, Jacob and Matteo intervened. They grabbed him, trying to hold him back and calm him down. "What's your problem, man?" Dylan shouted, his voice breaking with frustration. But then, as he saw the cold fury in my eyes, realization dawned. His expression shifted to panic. "How was I supposed to know she was your wife?" he stammered, trying to backpedal. His excuse sounded pathetic, and it only made my anger burn hotter. I stepped closer, forcing myself to remain as calm as possible. "If you come near me or her again, you'll lose a lot more than just your phone," I said, my voice low and steady. Jacob and Matteo dragged him away, their faces tense with unease. I spent the rest of the night sitting alone by the fire, staring into the flames as my thoughts spun in every direction. The betrayal, the rage, the disbelief. It was all too much to process. By morning, none of us spoke much as we packed up camp. The cheerful atmosphere we'd started with had been replaced by tension and awkward silence. After what had happened, there was no salvaging the trip. We all went our separate ways. But I knew this was far from over. How could I possibly continue with the hunt after what had happened? My mind was a storm of emotions: anger, betrayal, disbelief. I cut the trip short and headed home, arriving much earlier than expected. When I walked through the door, Olivia looked genuinely surprised to see me. "You're back already? What happened?" she asked, clearly not expecting me so soon. "Nothing special," I said, barely able to keep my voice steady. "I just ran into your lover during the hunt. He couldn't stop singing your praises." Her face froze. For a moment, she looked completely blindsided. "What are you talking about? Is this some kind of joke?" she asked, her voice faltering. "I wish it were," I replied, my words cutting through the thick tension like a blade. "But I'm being more honest than I've ever been." She stood there in silence, the weight of my accusation sinking in. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, she spoke, her voice trembling. "So, what now?" "Now?" I said, my tone cold and unyielding. "It's over. We're getting a divorce. I don't need a wife like you." Her face twisted with disbelief, her voice rising with desperation. "Just like that? You're going to erase everything we had? Everything we built?" "Yes," I said, my words sharp and unwavering. "You erased at the moment you took a lover." Without another word, she turned and walked into another room, shutting the door behind her. I could only assume she thought I'd cool down, have a change of heart, or feel some spark of regret. But all I felt in that moment was cold emptiness. I didn't want to see her. I didn't want to hear her. I just wanted her gone. After a while, she came back out. Her voice was quieter now, resigned. "I'll give you a couple of days to pack up," she said. "I'll file for divorce tomorrow," I told her, the finality of it hanging heavily in the air. There were tears. There was begging. But it didn't matter anymore. I was done. The divorce went through quickly as expected. Olivia's affair unraveled not long after that. Her lover, married with a family, wanted nothing to do with the fallout. The mess she created caught up with her in other ways, too. Word spread at her workplace, and the tension became unbearable. Eventually, she was forced to leave her job. With no job, no apartment, and no husband, Olivia ended up moving back to her parents' home in her hometown. From what I've heard, they weren't thrilled to have her return. She was left with little more than regret and the remnants of a life she'd carelessly shattered. And so, there you have it. Even the strongest-looking relationships can crumble, and the perfect wife may not be so perfect after all. It's a harsh reminder to stay vigilant, because life has a way of throwing you surprises when you least expect them.